I'm Tyler Wally, and this is the Pit Boss. Hello and welcome to the Pit Boss. I'm your host and airvac service technician, Tyler Wally. Today we're going to demonstrate how to service your vacuum pump. So let's get to it. To do a gearbox oil change, you'll need just 1 quart of VS 150 oil, an oil pan, some paper towel to clean up any messes, and then once we get into the claws section to clean those out, you'll need some acetone, a non-abrasive wipe, your sets of Allen wrenches, you'll need a pry bar and a cheater bar, and then a can of the Molykote D321R. To drain the gearbox oil, you'll find the drain plug. It's located right under the sight glass here on the side. And all you do is you just slide your oil pan underneath there, loosen that drain plug out, and just let the oil drain right out into the pan. Now that the oil's been drained, you want to put the drain plug back in, and then to fill it up, you'll have to get into the access panel here on the top of the pump. To get into the access panel, the first thing you'll need to do is remove this eye hook. You can use a screwdriver, your breaker bar, whatever works, but just get that loose. It'll come out by hand. Then usually all you would need to do to get in here is just take your Allen screw and loosen up these 4 bolts here. In the event that they become stripped out, like a few of these have, one option is to file or use a Dremel, make a straight line through the bolt so that you can use a flathead screwdriver to unscrew it. Now that we have the bolts taken out, what we're going to do is we're going to remove this cover and the foam protective underneath it. And there you can see the orange cap says oil on it. So you just unscrew that. And you'll need a funnel to get down in there. Pour the oil in. Once you get the whole quart in, just screw this back on. And you are done with your oil change. So now we're going to get into the actual pump itself. We're going to break it down to expose the claws. The reason you would need to do this is if your pump seizes up, if it's taken on water or any other processed material, and you think it might just need a good cleaning. It can be a little intimidating from the sounds, but it's actually pretty smooth process to get into, so that's what we're going to get into now. First thing you'll want to do is you're going to want to turn the power off to the pump, both at the switch on the panel door itself and then at the breaker. Then from there, that eye hook that's up on top that you took off for the oil change, you're going to want to take that off again. That one there. And then you'll need to disassemble your inlet pipe and disconnect your exhaust pipe as well. This one will have to be taken off completely. All you have to do is disconnect the flange here. Then you'll take your pipe wrench to get this started. Once you get it started, it just threads out by hand. Same goes for this one. You might need a wrench to get it started, but then just thread it out by hand. Now you're ready to take the 6 bolts that are around the side you're going to want to take out. So now we'll just go through and loosen these up. And once you have those off, you're going to lift this whole cover off. It'll come off all in one piece. The only thing you want to do is you want to just kind of fold it out over this drain plug and sight glass a little bit on this side just to get it started. And from there it'll come straight off. Just set this aside. Now that you're in here, you're going to want to go just layer by layer till you get back to the claws. You'll have this first, the exhaust housing here will be the first part that you'll take off. And then you'll get into the actual housing of the claws itself. So on this section here, you'll have 11 bolts that go all the way around. There'll be Allen bolts too. You have one here, 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 3 along each side, and then 1 in the middle. For these bottom 3 here, you'll need a longer Allen wrench to get down underneath those housing pieces to get to them. We'll get those loose. This is where the breaker bar will come in handy. Once you get them all broke loose, then you'll just go around and start taking them out. I have a lot of them out already too, so You know, the more you take out, you might have to put some pressure underneath that housing piece, kind of lift up on it to get them to spin freely, but they'll come out. So after you get the bolts taken out, this front plate here will just come right off. And you just set it aside. And to get this next section off, there's 4 nuts on studs in here. Loosen those up, take them off, and slide this next housing piece off of those studs. So for these, you'll need a socket wrench, an extension, just long enough to get back in there. And then I'm using a 17mm socket to get these loose and out of here. You may need to use your cheater bar to bust them loose, but once they come loose, then they just thread right off. Now that you have those 4 nuts off of there, all you'll do is you just slide this last piece off of the 4 studs that are inside. You'll have to pick it up just a little bit to get it off of that foam at the bottom. And then it'll just slide right out. To get into this next section here, you'll have to remove these top pieces here. There's 3 bolts that go down, and I'll be using a 13mm socket for those. So once you get those bolts out, these are 2 separate sections here. So the top piece of the inlet housing will come up, and inside of that you'll have your conical screen. Now while you got this open, you want to just look it over, make sure it's nice and clean, no built up gunk on there. If you do have anything on it, you can use carb cleaner, Dawn dish soap and water, anything to get that thing cleaned off and let a bunch of air flow through there the way it should. So this lower piece of housing here, inside of it, it has the anti-suckback valve. You also want to make sure that that is cleaned off as well. This last section here, this is going to be the last housing piece that you'll take off. You don't want to go any farther past that, and you want to make sure that you don't pull the claw out of the pump itself. If either of those things do happen, you're going to want to get a hold of someone at Bush. They're going to have to come out and retime your pump, and you'll see why here in a minute. But we'll start with these 3 bolts, we'll get those off, and then we'll get to the claws. This is going to be where your breaker bar comes in handy. You're going to want to rest it between these splines here. You can see where the housing pieces are separated. So kind of just rest it in there, and you're going to push this housing piece off here. The 6 bolts hold it on, but there are also 2 pins that it's resting on as well. So once you slide it off of those, then you can kind of shimmy it on out of there too. But you're definitely going to need a breaker bar to get it started. And then just go back and forth, side to side real gently. You don't want this thing to fall down and come crashing down onto the claws themselves too. So that's another thing to keep in mind when you're taking this off. It feels pretty loose now. And it slides right off. And this is what you're left with. So once you get that housing piece off of there, you want to keep in mind this tight little tolerance here between the claws. They do spin freely, and so if you get a finger caught in there, that could do some damage, so just be aware of that. And as far as the cleaning goes, you want to make sure that you use a non-abrasive cloth or material. You don't want to use any Scotch-Brite, Brillo pads, or anything like that. Nice and soft, nothing that's going to scratch that surface up. So then you just take your acetone. I like to just soak the rag and then go around. You're going to wipe down every surface you can get to on these things. Kind of move them around as you go. Get all the nooks and crannies around there. And I like to do the inside of the housing as well. Any of these flat surfaces here get nice and cleaned up. Once you have everything cleaned, then you're going to want to use that moly coat. It looks just like a spray paint can. It's going to apply just like spray paint does. You want to hold it back a good, anywhere from 6 inches to a foot, and just put a nice light coat all the way around it. Cover the claws, the backrest here, and then I like to go on the inside of the housing as well too. And one thing to keep in mind with this, the warmer the air is, the quicker this is gonna set up for you. So I like to apply a coat, let it dry off for a little bit, and then spin it, do the next coat, and just keep doing that till you get all the way around it, both the housing and the claws. You want to make sure that there isn't any running or any buildup of this stuff too. Anything that can build up and get caught inside of that tight little tolerance there, it's either going to wear it off completely, or if it's, you know, big enough, it could seize your pump up again. So just one thing to keep in mind as you're applying this. Once you get all that on, everything's dried, then you're ready to put the pump back together, same way it came apart, and that's all there is to it. Thank you for watching this episode of The Pit Boss. If you have any questions, you can give us a call here at AirVac. The number is 1-800-AIRVAC9, and follow the prompts to the service department. I'll get you in touch with one of us. Thanks again.